country is the world's biggest debtor nation. We used to be the world's biggest creditor nation. We used to make stuff. We used to export stuff. And it's like, this has consequences, and it's the reason why we're seeing this massive amount of wealth inequality. And we're seeing things in massive cities, like we're starting to have more and more homeless. And I just think it trickles down, and no one is going at the root cause. And the root cause is over in Washington, and it's what they're doing with our money. So yeah, I'm very passionate about helping people learn about that.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Changing the Tide. Today I'm stoked to bring on Natalie Brunell. She is a now former news reporter and journalist. She has since left her former role and is now going on to news shows. She's been on a couple of different local Los Angeles stations, orange pilling the metropolitan Los Angeles area, and it's been really fun to watch her develop her show this year into one with tens of thousands of followers. And it helps with how many Bitcoin luminaries, let's call them, that she has brought on, people who are influential thought leaders, builders. You think of people from Preston Pysh to Michael Saylor to Lynn Alden to Vijay Boyapati. That episode just came out recently. And tons more. You just have to go check out her Coin Stories podcast. Really excited today to get a deep dive into her mindset, having built this podcast, Coin Stories, and watched it grow pretty quickly. Shout out to her too, first sponsor, Bitcoin 2022. So that's super exciting. And without further ado, let's dive in and hear Natalie's Coin Story. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, very excited to have you as well. Yesterday, by the way, I think it was, you put out a tweet with you on Fox LA. Oh, yeah. And yeah, the whole tagline was, before we teach people about Bitcoin, we need to teach them about the problem of inflation. Mm-hmm. And so tell us a little bit about how that all went down, that interview.
Yeah, so I'm trying to sort of orange pill the general public using my skills from the last 10 years as a reporter and anchor. And yeah, I've been making some news appearances, which has been really, really fun. I'm used to being inside the news studio or doing live shots. But I feel like the mainstream news isn't covering Bitcoin, or they're not covering it in a way that they should. And I think one of the most important ways to teach people about Bitcoin is to help them sort of understand some of the problems that exist in our society and how money and our broken money system has caused them. So I think, you kind of need to take a step back and not just talk about Bitcoin as sort of this investment asset or something that, might attract people to trade. I think we should talk to people about money printing and inflation and why things around them are getting more expensive while, people's retirements are not growing or people's wages aren't keeping up. So I think it's just really important to have these conversations. And I feel like there's no one place to go to kind of get it in a way that simplifies the message.
Well, I think that was what was so refreshing about it, is that on, let's say, mainstream news or what have you, but that was a local news channel, but in any case, still mainstream. The idea is that no one will ever talk about the Cantillon effect, right? You didn't use those words, but you literally demonstrated it.
Yeah, it's funny. I really think that most people, if they understood, they would get more upset about how the system is currently working, and they wouldn't necessarily vote the way that they are. I truly think it's like politicians are selling everyone a free lunch and not sharing the opportunity costs, because people just really don't understand fundamentally how our government money system works. And I was there, right? So I feel like I relate, because for the longest time, I certainly, when I was younger, I was for a lot of these policies. I was like, of course you want to, pay all this money to help these programs, and you don't really understand why that actually hurts people in the long run, and why, we're making it harder and harder for future generations to really afford anything. And so I think you need to start peeling back the layers in a friendly and constructive and warm manner. And I just think it's really sad that right now we're printing up a storm, and no one understands that all of that money is really pooling at the top. So if people are going to get upset, that, oh, we should tax the rich and why do we have all this inequality? Well, there's actually a reason for it, and it started a very long time ago, and undoing it is going to be very difficult, but Bitcoin provides us this life raft that makes it a little bit softer of a blow, right? Because otherwise you would need this massive crash or recession, this painful recession, to sort of undo all of the malinvestments and the leverage that we've been building up. But Bitcoin offers us a chance to opt out, shift onto these other monetary rails and take it for a nice ride to utopia, right? No, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, Bitcoin offers us a chance to really peacefully and easily go back to a system of sound money.
Amazing. And as this podcast would call it, changing the tide towards greater freedom. Well, so let's peel back then a little bit towards when did you first come across Bitcoin, and what was it about it that really captured your interest at first?
Yeah, so I learned about Bitcoin for the first time in 2017. I was working for a local news market in Northern California. And I, like so many people, I heard about it and I just didn't understand it. I thought it was, internet funny money. I was skeptical. I didn't go down the rabbit hole, and I really regret that. I wish I did. But I was curious enough and intrigued enough to buy some. So I had friends that were talking about it. Most of them lived in Silicon Valley and San Francisco. Some of them worked in crypto or had been, owning it or trading it for a while. One of them had lost a bunch of Bitcoins in the Mt. Gox situation.
Oh, no.
So, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to what feels like a very different language, but I got on one of the exchanges and I purchased some Bitcoin, and then I started to slowly learn about it. And I think, a lot of people have said this even on my podcast. One of the best ways to take that step forward is just to buy some. It could be a tiny amount, but you start paying attention to the price, you start to get a little more curious. And so I started in 2017, and then I really went down the rabbit hole after I read the Bitcoin Standard. I read it twice and then ended up reading it a third time. And I was I truly was blown away. I was like, wow, I can't believe I didn't know all of this. I can't believe I never looked at things from this lens. And I started to think about my whole career and my whole just reporting life differently, because I had been interviewing so many people who are facing all of the problems that fiat has created, right? And I didn't understand it. I didn't connect the dots. And so when I read it and when I dug into the history of money, when I learned about Bitcoin, I was just like, this could help so many people. And I really wanted to just, spread the word. I wanted to learn more about the big Bitcoiners. That's why I started my podcast. And I just became very, very passionate, because I truly think that all of us have more in common than we have, different. And I know that we're very divisive right now, but I think we all have at the core this desire to make our lives better for the future generation and to protect our money in the future. And I think that, Bitcoin is a chance to really unite us, and most people don't understand it. So we need to get the word out.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And probably part of that, I'm guessing, of just your idea of wanting to make better. You've mentioned a lot about how you're a first generation American. Your parents came over here from, was it Poland?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was born in Poland. Yeah. Okay,
so you came along with them.
Yes.
And so they lived the Iron Curtain experience, and then here's the United States. And so do you feel like that laid a really good groundwork once you had the aha moment with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I watched my parents really struggle and work really hard to start their lives over here. And when I was young, I didn't really understand it, right? I vaguely remember my flight over from Poland. I remember, growing up, we didn't have as much as the people around me. We lived in a suburb, and people lived in these big, beautiful houses, and we were in this tiny apartment. And I just really saw my parents struggle and work hard and work constantly, work around the clock. And I saw in them, two people who just wanted to make their life better for their kids and give them a sense of education. They waited about 20 years to be able to come to the U.S. So, at that point, it was like they probably, could have had a good life if they had just stayed in Poland, but they were like, we could have a better one if we just, move across the ocean and allow our kids to get an American education. There was more of a sense of upward mobility in America and the sense of the American dream. So I see in my parents this, that sort of humble, modest, just, middle class like family that wants to just have a house and a small retirement fund and a nice vacation every single year. They don't want to be like Jeff Bezos and have a yacht and whatever, or fly to outer space. They just want a normal life for their kids. And I felt like it was just so hard, and all the sort of odds were stacked against them. And when the financial crisis happened, they lost everything. And it was like, why is it so hard in this country for two people who are working hard, who are good people, who pay their taxes? Why is it so hard to just survive at this point, So I just always felt like if there's something that can help people, like, first of all, I believe you should work hard. It's like you create your own destiny. You should persevere. You should work hard. No handouts. My parents never asked for any assistance or handouts. But I also think, like, if you're a good person and you do work hard, it shouldn't be so hard, right? You should be able to put your money away in the bank and not have to watch it completely collapse in value. And you shouldn't have to play stockbroker and trade or day trader in order to make a profit that beats inflation. I just think it should be easier for families here to have that, like, American dream life that I think used to be easier decades ago. So.
And on my end, I totally am with you on that, because I think it was around 08 or 09, and I wish I would have known about Bitcoin right when it came out, just like everyone. But Ron Paul had written In the Fed, right? And it was about inflation and what is the mechanism of the Fed and how does it actually work? And what was so cool, I think, that hit me was reading that article, or the headline in the Genesis block, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks, because it shows that the person or persons who created Bitcoin care about that same thing too. Like good, sound, solid money that helps people build a better life.
No, I agree. And I think what's interesting is you're right. I mean, even though we're really facing a crazy amount of inflation and money printing now as a response to the pandemic, this isn't actually new. It's been happening for many years. It happened as a response to the last financial crisis. It was happening after the dot-com bubble. It's been happening a lot. And I sort of, again, you kind of have to unlearn what you already know in order to understand all of this. And I do remember, some of the people that I grew up around, they had these amazing lives, but when you peel back the layers of their sort of wealth, it's almost imaginary. Everyone's in debt, right? I mean, nobody owns their house, nobody owns their car. They have student loans that are outrageous. I mean, my parents, coming from an immigrant background, they were always like, you have to save. You don't spend before you've saved enough that you could pay off whatever you spend. So I just think we live in this consumer-driven world where our economy's health is based on how much we're spending or putting on credit cards. And so it looks from the outside like everything's healthy, right? Everyone's got these nice cars, everyone has their toys, everything's shipped in from China, everyone's got the latest cool gear, but we're in debt. Our country is the world's biggest debtor nation. We used to be the world's biggest creditor nation. We used to make stuff. We used to export stuff. And it's like, this has consequences, and it's the reason why we're seeing this massive amount of wealth inequality. And we're seeing things in massive cities, like we're starting to have more and more homeless. And I just think it trickles down, and no one is going at the root cause, and the root cause is over in Washington, and it's what they're doing with our money. So yeah, I'm very passionate about helping people learn about that.
This is the fire lit within Natalie, everyone.
For sure.
Well, and that's maybe a good transition to the next question around just the idea of, I know you had the Career Stories podcast prior to Coin Stories. And so was that kind of the catalyst for, now I'm in Bitcoin, I can talk to Bitcoiners about their career, like Coin Stories? How did that all come about?
Yeah, so I loved doing my podcast because I love long form interviews. And in my job as a reporter, that's one thing that I just never felt like I got enough of. I would be running and gunning and have to turn a story every single day. And so you might meet someone and, have like a really interesting conversation, but a lot is left on the cutting room floor because the stories that you do are basically like 2 minutes long and that's it. You work pretty much 8 hours a day to put together 2 minutes of television. And so, but I've always loved long form interviews because I love getting to know people and why they are the way that they are and where they come from. But I also think it's nicer to just hear the full context as well. And you don't really see that, especially in a broadcast format because everything has to be fast. So I started Career Stories because I loved the podcast How I Built This with Guy Raz. And he focused a lot on business people and people who started these big companies and entrepreneurs. And I loved that he started from the very beginning about how people got to be where they are and the obstacles they overcame. For me, I don't know why I've always been curious about that, but I love just like biographies, autobiographies, and sort of that like the story of rags to riches and how people went from, not knowing anything and just, knocking on the door of an industry to becoming super, super great. I love learning about people's backstories and origin stories. So I wanted to know about people within more of like the media space or people who were their own brands. So everything from, producers and journalists to social media stars to politicians, the people who themselves were kind of their own company. And so I started that. I did it for about 3 years, or like 2.5, 3 years. And once I was really deep down the rabbit hole, I had been following all of these big Bitcoiners. And I go, I wonder where they all came from. Like you see them all tweeting and they're really big and their following count is huge. And so I would sit there and I'd be like, how did, Dan Held get into this? How did Robert Breedlove get into this? How did Anthony Pompliano get into this? Who the heck are these people? And so I started to reach out, and originally it was just going to be kind of like a season of Career Stories. It was going to be called Coin Stories, and it was going to be limited to, I joke with people that I wanted to do like the 12 apostles and have Peter Schiff be Judas, and like it's going to be like a meme of, the Last Supper and all these big Bitcoiners because I'm religious. But yeah, so I was aiming for literally like 12 or 13 episodes for a season, and then I launched the first episodes of that at the Bitcoin conference. It grew very, very quickly. It found an audience. People were encouraging me to keep going and they wanted to hear more people's stories. So I started to continue. I basically turned it into my new profession. So I never intended it to necessarily become something permanent, but I was very passionate about doing it. So
that is awesome. The 12, I'm not sure I've heard that listening to you at all, that you were wanting to do the 12 apostles. That's amazing.
I just love it because, I like everyone does these cool memes, and I was just joking around with one of my friends before actually doing it. And I was like, I want to get, like 12 or 13 of the biggest names. And I definitely want Peter Schiff as the contrarian. And we were just joking because, I'm Catholic. And so we thought, like it could be, the 12 apostles and then Judas.
Man. Yeah. Well, I think, kudos to you for having Peter on the podcast because you got him to admit that he wanted to buy or he should have bought Bitcoin.
Yeah, he gave me kind of a gem of a soundbite. It was really funny. We were wrapping up the interview, and I just asked him. I like to ask at the end of my interviews, like kind of a reflection question. Like when I was doing Career Stories, my last question was always, if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, what would you say? And all the answers, what's fascinating is people could be in every single different kind of industry, and everyone kind of gives the same answer. It's like, have confidence, believe in yourself, go for it, don't doubt yourself, whatever. So I was expecting for him to say something similar. I was like, what would you, if you could go back in time, like, what would you tell your younger self, or what would you do? And he goes to the Bitcoin answer, and I was like, this is amazing. I can't wait to play this because he could have said anything. And he's like, well, clearly, I wish I bought Bitcoin.
That's amazing, which he has never admitted, as far as I can tell, anywhere else. Yeah. So Nice work to you.
Thanks.
Well, I really see you changing the tide because a lot of the people that were instrumental in my Bitcoin journey, Pierre Rochard, Saifedean, Ammous, I mean, there's a whole list of them. I think Caitlin Long, have you? Yeah.
He's going to be on my podcast in November.
Okay, so she's going to be on it. I saw that there was plans for it, and I didn't know if it had happened yet. So,
Yeah.
but there's the list is endless. But you're curating this amazing feed, like Willy Woo, for instance. For years I've been following him, but Preston Pish. Okay, I'll stop. But the idea is you're curating like their story, which is really cool because we get the Twitter side of things, or whatever it might be, but to actually get them to tell their backstory and origins, it's a really cool concept, and I do think it's helping people understand like how did these people understand Bitcoin as a tool for freedom and prosperity and fun. Like it's fun to be in the Bitcoin community.
Yeah, I mean, I just really like sort of getting to know the human side of people because increasingly, especially with COVID, we're all sitting behind a computer screen and we all turn into sort of these pseudonymous or, just digital versions of ourselves. And there's something about just getting to know what someone was like when they were younger and what kind of family background they came from and how they heard about Bitcoin and how they went down the rabbit hole. And I just think I just like that human side where we can all relate. Because again, I think we have a lot more in common than we have sort of apart. And I don't know. I like learning about people's lives a lot. So I'm going to continue doing this as long as I can.
Cool. I love it. Okay. So there's the reporter side of Natalie Brunell. There's also the professor side or the educator side. And you recently launched your course for women in Bitcoin with Pomp. Yes. Was that last week?
Yeah, so we're in week 2 right now. It's 3 weeks. Super excited because Pomp has been doing this. It's called Crypto Academy. So he teaches other projects. He does like smart contracts, NFTs. And he's been doing that for many, many months. He's had almost 1,000 alumni go through it. A lot of them have been hired by different crypto exchanges or companies within the space. And the companies actually came to him and they said, we love all of this, but where are the women? Where are your female students? And so I think he saw like a really great opportunity to create a place where women were taught by another woman and maybe it felt like a more inviting place, right? Than going into a virtual room where you're asking questions and you're like the one girl and there's 45 guys. So I think he knew that I was a university educator, and he contacted me and asked if I'd be interested, and I was so grateful because I love teaching and I love Bitcoin and I love being a woman and I want to bring more women into the space. So it kind of worked out, and we launched it last week. We have 40 women from around the world. We have someone from Guatemala, Mexico City, Barcelona, London, Australia, all over the US. And we're coming together in these not only workshops, but discussion groups. We have little virtual social events, question and answer sessions. We're all on a really cool Slack kind of community that we can share memes and share questions and resources and network. And I love it. I'm super proud of it. I'm super grateful that the women have, believe in me to help them go down this journey and help them down the rabbit hole. So I'm super grateful for that chance. It's been a really great experience so far.
That's great. Well, congrats on the launch of that.
Thanks.
And yeah, it's a 3-week course. Are you planning on replicating it and doing it again?
I would love to. We don't have anything set in stone right now, but it's definitely something I would like to do. So Pomps has been going on for a while, and it's very, very successful. So I would love for it to become that. It's just this is our first go around. So
yeah.
So we'll see.
That's fair. Well, yeah, it'll be one of those cool things at the end. 40 new Bitcoiners who are women.
Yeah.
And hopefully they will replicate it as well.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is to help them simplify the message so that they can share it with their own communities, right? So they have a bunch of women and we all pick each other's brains, and we all will eventually have the mission of orange pilling everyone in our lives. And so I think it will have this great ripple effect, right? I mean, these 40
Yep.
women will each one will talk to 5 women in their lives, and then those women will talk to those women. So I just think it's like that pebble, in the water effect. So yeah, I'm really excited. And they're amazing. They're incredible. Like last night, we were all talking about Bitcoin versus the other cryptocurrencies and the Mark Cuban conversation online. And we were all kind of debating that. And so it's really fun because Twitter is sort of a black hole. And so, the rabbit hole of Bitcoin is wide and gaping. And sometimes people just don't know where to start, right? Like, which book do you read first? You're kind of in a silo by yourself. You might reach out to some stranger on Twitter. Well, this is literally like a live class, right? Where we're all sort of interacting in real time around the world, talking about Bitcoin and why we're passionate about it. So it's super fun.
That's really cool. This open global monetary network, and you have this awesome space to do this with people across the world too at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it is. And the Bitcoin Twitter world can also be rough to navigate. It can be a gauntlet to run. I know a lot of people gave you kind of a rough treatment about this course. For what it's worth on my end, it's like, hey, there is such a value to an in-person experience with live teaching. Mm-hmm. And in a space where you feel like you can focus on the content mm-hmm. rather than anything else.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I believe in free markets as a Bitcoiner and as a libertarian.
What?
And I also think that life should be about choice, right? So you can go online and do everything by yourself, and there are amazing free resources, not just for Bitcoin, but like I could go on YouTube right now and learn to play the guitar. Or I could go online and I could find every fitness video and watch all of it and, get really fit. Or I could be like, you know what, I'm going to hire this guy who's a guitar instructor and he has experience instructing people. I'm going to learn from him. Or I'm going to hire a personal trainer and I'm going to give myself this amount of time to get in shape. Like, people should have choices and make choices freely. And I'm not a big believer in being toxic or maximalist in the sense that you all of a sudden make the community no longer a safe, inviting place. So yeah.
Yeah, that's well said. Well said. So one of the tweets that caught my attention recently too was your recent sit down interview. It looked like it was in person with Roya at I forget what her group is, but she's Afghani, right?
Yeah.
And is it specifically for women in tech in Afghanistan as well as kind of her focus?
Yeah, I mean, she's incredible. Alex Gladstein wrote a fabulous article about her in Bitcoin Magazine.
Yes.
And he invited me to the Human Rights Foundation's conference, which is the Oslo Freedom Forum. It was held in Miami just 2 weeks ago. And I had the chance to sit down with her. She was one of the panelists. And her story is just incredible. I mean, she was born in Afghanistan, and it was always her mission to help women and empower women. And there's such a patriarchy that exists there where it's hard for some women to even have bank accounts because they're just not able to, where they don't get permission. And so she has, always been working in companies in the tech space because her background is computer science. She's always been doing sort of work where she allows women to not only share their views and sort of be empowered to do like female blogging and go online and connect with one another and share their stories, but she always offered to pay them in Bitcoin. And she was paying a lot of women in Bitcoin. And it was a way for them to kind of, go around the system where you normally would need a bank account or permission from your husband or your father. And it was just interesting to hear her story because she got into this much earlier when Bitcoin was not very expensive. I think it was like $100, and she'd be paying women in Bitcoin, and like the bull runs happened, and people went from having Bitcoin that was worth a ton to all of a sudden crashing. And so some of the women that worked for her, they basically lost a lot of money, and so she committed herself to making them whole. So she would buy back their Bitcoin at the high price, even though it had crashed, and she did that out of her own pocket and out of her own company's money. And some women decided to keep the Bitcoin. They believed that Bitcoin would actually probably regain, its price and return to a bull market. And those women have done pretty well for themselves. But the others, I mean, she was always willing to just make them whole, make sure that they're not losing money. So she has this fabulous story. She was eventually kind of driven out of Afghanistan, and now she's working to get people out. She's actively involved in like the evacuation process, and people that weren't able to access their bank accounts, they can transact in Bitcoin. And it's just so amazing to hear how it's helping people all over the world, especially in countries that are really in need of a system for financial freedom and for being sort of your own bank. And so I loved sitting down with her. It was fabulous. She's wonderful. And I really encourage people to check out digitalcitizenfund.org if they want to help her efforts, because she's really committed to providing educational and employment opportunities for women in Afghanistan. So yeah, she's great.
Yeah. So it sounds like she accommodated both the people who used Bitcoin as their unit of account, right? And were like, I'm going to keep this because I think this is like the sounder money, but also for people who are measuring their value in fiat, she was like, okay, I will make you whole on that side if that's how that's pretty committed.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's funny, the Bitcoins that she bought back ended up financing her sister's college.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just, incredible stories. Like, I love it. It's just wonderful. So I highly recommend people checking out her interview.
That's awesome. And so on top of just your podcast and the course, you also now have your first podcast sponsors. So a big congrats in order for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how that opportunity came about.
So I loved going to the Bitcoin conference last year. I was totally a newbie in the space. I mean, even though I had been investing in 2017, no one knew I had a podcast. No one knew who I was. But I had the greatest time. I took my best girlfriend, and I've been orange pilling her. She's an attorney, and she's actually interested now in becoming sort of a crypto attorney or Bitcoin attorney. And we went there, and the only people I knew are the people that I had actually interviewed prior to that. But Bitcoin Magazine, because I was a reporter, they gave me a media pass, so I had the opportunity to sort of go in the media lounge and also backstage and, introduce myself and ask people for interviews. So the Bitcoin conference is literally how I landed some of my biggest interviews. Like, I walked up to Michael Saylor backstage and handed him my card, and eventually I got him on my show. Saifedean hosted this big carnivore dinner, and he had not been responding to my messages, and Saifedean and Saylor were like my top two dream sort of interview guests. And I had messaged, I'm very persistent because I'm a reporter. So I had messaged Saifedean so many times on both email and like Twitter. And I mean, I found one of his like random resumes online that were from, I don't know, that was from the early 2000s that had obscure random jobs on it. And I was bringing random stuff up in emails like, oh, I see that like you had this company in Switzerland, and like it's really interesting because the name is similar to this other person that I know. I mean, I was just like grasping at straws to try to make a connection. No response. And then I heard about his carnivore dinner, so I bought a ticket. I was probably one of the first people to like hit buy on the pass when it was released. And I pretty much begged him in person to please be on my podcast. I love his book. And I met Preston Pish at that dinner. I got to hang out with Max Kaiser and Stacy. I mean, the Bitcoin conference was incredible. So long story short, the Bitcoin conference is my first sponsor, and it just feels like a very full circle special moment because I had an incredible time there, and it's part of the reason why my podcast was able to grow. So
That's fantastic. Yeah. The other way I see you changing the tide is bringing this Emmy-winning, kind of personality and grit and grind. Because being a podcaster myself, I know the grind of trying to get people on. Mm-hmm. And so big kudos to you for that sponsorship.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm really grateful, super excited.
So what are you excited about, let's say, over the next couple years with Bitcoin, everything that's going on with Lightning? What are you looking forward to?
I mean, I just would really love to see more mainstream adoption and more fair and educated coverage in the news. So one of the reasons why I decided to basically leave my job and pursue this as my new calling is I feel like there's so much good we can do by just sharing this message and helping people understand the system, kind of how I mentioned at the beginning of this interview. I think that people would totally buy into Bitcoin and what it stands for if they just understood what the problems are and how they're caused around them. And so it's just my mission to get in front of as many people as possible, whether that's, local news appearances, whether I can conduct some speaking engagements, if I can do courses, if I can do free educational opportunities. I am interested and excited about all of the above. I just want to help people down the rabbit hole, and they don't necessarily need to know, how to build a car engine and how every technical aspect of Bitcoin works, but just understand how bad fiat is and why some of the problems that maybe they've faced with money or in their communities, why it's connected to money. And so I'm just excited to go on this journey and see what happens. Life's short, so instead of going down the path that I knew and that was stable and I could predict what it would look like in 5 years, I decided to take the path that no one's traveled on. I'm going to see what I can do with it.
A more exciting path that, with great risk comes great reward.
I agree.
So actually, one of the questions I wanted to ask you stems from the fact that there's been so much I've learned from your podcast. Like, for instance, with Michael Saylor's interview, I never made the connection with all of the different domain names that MicroStrategy has bought and how that idea of digital scarcity influenced him on the Bitcoin side. So for you, maybe what are the top 2 or 3 things you had no idea that really just stuck out to you from any of your interviews?
Oh gosh, that's so hard.
Probably a lot.
Yeah, every interview has been absolutely incredible. I'm releasing this week an interview with Vijay Boyapati, who wrote The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. And I had read that he worked for Google. He was one of the early employees, but he shared this story that I think is incredible. So I hope people listen to the podcast. But basically, he talked about when Google decided to go to China, but China has all of these rules, right? They censor a ton. And so there was like this kind of conflict where Google is supposed to empower people and bring freedom of information to the world, but here they are, this opportunity to go into a massive country, a massive new market, to establish global dominance as the biggest search engine. But China was like, well, you can only do it if you censor this and this. And originally they did it. Google said that they would go along with it. And so he shares the story behind that. And I was like, oh my gosh. And Vijay didn't stand for that. So he went off the team. He's like, I don't believe in this. And so It was just kind of amazing hearing that story. So I really liked that. Michael Saylor's whole backstory, I think, was really fascinating, and how just, by happenstance, he had this heart murmur or something diagnosed, and he was supposed to go into the Air Force, but then all of a sudden the doctor misdiagnosed him, and so his path took him down the business route, and how he started kind of a company within the bigger company that he was working for. The domain thing is funny, and I was kicking myself because I have a good friend who bought the domain saylorforpresident.com, and and I totally could have brought it up to Saylor, and it just spaced because I think I was a little nervous talking to Michael, but it would have been really funny to ask him about that because I think Saylor would be a great president. Yeah, I mean, every interview has been wonderful. There are still a lot of people I want to interview, and I have a long wish list, including Kathy Wood, and I would love to interview Jack Mallers and Elon Musk. That's like really reaching, but yeah, I have a long list and want to continue interviewing a lot of people.
That's awesome. Yeah, I will continue to tune in for sure. As far as VJ is concerned in that story, that's such a fascinating trend just overall in technology, needing, at least in a fiat world, to access the China market, so to speak, like all of the opportunity there. Mm-hmm. That's a very fascinating story, not just with Google, but I think across the board.
I thought it was super fascinating. And especially, this year, everything we've seen with the mining ban and all of it leaving and reestablishing itself in the West, which I think is actually really great for Bitcoin in the long run. I just find it fascinating. And to think that American companies would be influenced by that and actually go along with that type of authoritarian censorship, that's really sad to know, but yeah.
Yeah. I hear stories about how it was kind of I think it was during the Nixon era or the transition to the Ford administration where we actually reopened trade with China as the United States, and that it's been going on just like the fiat issues. It's been going on since then. So.
Yeah, you know what I think is really scary? I've watched some of the documentaries of what life in China is like right now after the pandemic. I don't know if you've seen any of these, but it's just like mini documentaries or video reports that people have put out. And, they have their whole phone system that almost is like Black Mirror, that one episode where everything gets tracked and they know how close you get in distance to somebody else. And literally they have every piece of information. But the Chinese citizens are very programmed to think it's okay, and they think that their safety is basically provided to them by the government and insured by the government. And that's what scares me about some of the things that are happening in our country, because it's like people are so willing to give up their freedoms that people fought so hard for, and why this country was established, and the vision of the founding fathers. And that scares me a lot. And that's why I think Bitcoin is so amazing and powerful, because it's just you taking control and authority over your money and your financial future. And I hope that we don't continue down this path as a result of the pandemic of allowing the government to dictate everything in our lives, because it's a very slippery slope. I don't know how you walk it back once you've walked it too far. And, coming from a background where my family grew up in communism, I'm very, very wary of that and very, very scared of that. So when I hear people being very friendly to the idea of socialism, I'm like, okay, we need to sit you down and educate you about how this system actually works, because it will lead to just horrible, miserable inequality in many different ways. So, yeah.
I bet you grew up on those stories. Did your parents talk to you a lot about what life was like in communist Poland?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was sometimes hard just to get the bare necessities, and you would have to wait in line. And I was very little, so I don't really have the memories, but my mom's dream was always to come here. She just wanted out. And it was just really, really hard for a very, very long time. And Poland was constantly invaded, and it was almost difficult to have a sense of just national identity. I mean, Poland was just constantly overtaken. And it was just hard. Yeah, it was really, really hard. There was no sense of, I don't know, the sense of achieving something really great, whether you studied hard or worked hard. None of that really mattered. Everyone was sort of equal, but no one had enough of what they needed. And so I'm super grateful that my family sort of raised me to understand these systems and why we should never support leaders that are heading us in that direction. And again, it's just, what's funny is I think that a lot of people have great intentions, right? They hear a politician go out there and say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to spend this money. We're going to help this. We're going to create this program. And we're sort of just making money out of thin air and everyone thinks it's okay. And so that's why I think that education is so important, because it's not that simple. And you are allowing someone to basically create a system where people are reliant on the government. You're creating almost this group of victims. And it's almost like, what did Peter Schiff say in his book? It's like the government is good at crippling you and then giving you a crutch and saying, aren't you glad I was here to give you that? And I just think it's so true. It's like the government is causing a lot of these problems and then coming to the rescue like they're this white knight and, the white knight coming in and to save us. And it's, you're actually the one that caused this.
The White House Twitter handle, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, came out with, the cost of this infrastructure bill is actually $0. If you make under $400,000, you won't see a penny. It'll all be tax increase. And it's like, wait, so you're saying the cost isn't $0? Because like if you make above $400,000 a year, you're going to pay for it.
This stuff really gets me, because people are forgetting the inflation tax. They don't understand it. We just live in this world, I think, where people are like, oh yeah, things just get more expensive, right? We just have to accept that. And it's just the way it is. And it's the way it always was. And who knows what's causing it? That on the one end. Meanwhile, this $600 reporting requirement by the IRS. So the White House and the government can spend trillions of dollars in Afghanistan and the city falls within a day. But God forbid you send $600, the average person, to someone, they're going to come after you. But it's like we don't hold them accountable, but they want to hold each average person who's just trying to get by and make it. We're now we have to have like a lens on all of us. So I think it's ridiculous. I think some of the things that go on are ridiculous. And Bitcoin fixes this.
Bitcoin fixes this, but getting out the word is key, right? Because a lot of people still don't understand Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Including Mark Cuban. What do you think it is about? I mean, billionaires. You have Michael Saylor who gets it. Then you have someone who like Mark Cuban, who not only doesn't understand that inflation is the issue, but actually like praises the Federal Reserve and central banks. What do you think it is?
I don't know. I was kind of surprised by that conversation and some of the elements to it. I mean, even when he was talking about government tapering, and how I think Lynn Alden was really great. And she came in there with just a simple sentence and she's like, I don't think they're going to keep this going. I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I wonder, is he reliant on something? Does he have connections within the political sphere that he doesn't want to upset? I don't know. I'm really confused by why he wouldn't see the ultimate value of Bitcoin to everyone and uplifting everyone, rising the tides for everybody. But, he believes like Dogecoin is a great medium of exchange because I guess people pay for things at Mavs events with Dogecoin. I don't understand it. I was very, very surprised. I thought that he would really get Bitcoin, and it seems like he hasn't done all of his homework, but, who knows?
Yeah. A lot of people who built wealth, he's socked a lot of it into a sports team and watched that sports team appreciate over time. Maybe he's reliant on inflation to increase the value of his holdings, but in any case, who knows?
Yeah, it's just sad when people in that position sort of encourage coins that have an unlimited supply and whose leadership is centralized and the technology is not something that could be a great store of value, and so people could end up losing a lot of money. And I see the appeal. Like, this is one of the things I was talking about with my workshop group is I see the appeal of why someone would want to put money into Shiba Inu or Doge or one of these other, because it's very cheap, right? So you could be a whale with $100 because you got in before it was even a penny, and you see the returns, and people tweet out, if you had put $1,000 into Shiba Inu last January, today you'd be a 100 millionaire, right? And so I can see why people would rather do that and almost gamble and go to the casino as opposed to putting $1,000 into Bitcoin, which maybe would double, like maybe. I mean, but now when you have people who are in positions of influence also saying, yeah, Dogecoin's great, and they're encouraging that sort of mentality, and that's what I really worry about. And again, I don't know if it's that Mark has ulterior motives or if he hasn't done his homework on certain things. I'm not really sure. I don't know. But, certainly there are a lot of billionaires out there who are beneficiaries of the fiat system. They carry a lot of assets in fiat denominations, whether it's real estate or stocks. And maybe they have friends in the White House. I don't know. So I don't really know why they would put out that messaging, but it definitely concerns me.
Yeah. And to your point, I remember that tweet that you talked about, talking with someone who is a trader in the altcoin casino or whatever you want to call it, saying like, why would I go for 2x returns rather than, 100x? What did you kind of land on to answer that question? Like, why stick with Bitcoin rather than trading at the casino?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a hard question to answer because I think that people really need to understand the technology of Bitcoin, and they need to understand also what is money. So I think that there's a huge hurdle, because at the end of the day, if someone wants to put their chips on the table where if it takes off, they make 100,000%, like some of these altcoins have done, that's their choice. That's their choice. But I just hope people really take a hard look at Bitcoin as solving a ton of the problems that we have and allowing us to go back to a sense of hard money at the base layer of our economy. And just, the programming, the network, the difficulty adjustment, everything about Bitcoin is so brilliant, and it's brilliant in a simplistic way, and it's also brilliant in an extremely complicated way. And so until people really understand a little bit about the technology, I don't think they come to appreciate Bitcoin, and they just look at it as a price. They look at it as, oh, it's too expensive, it's $60,000, I'm too late. Or, oh, this coin can make me, way more returns. But truly, Bitcoin is like this disruptive technology that can help people around the world and almost like equalize us and provide a redistribution of wealth. And people don't get it. And it's very hard to have an elevator pitch when they just want to go, buying Shiba Inu or Hex or what. I mean, I get messaged constantly by people with, oh, you should get Hex and you should get this coin and that coin, and so it's hard.
Yeah. The how's your trade or whatever that that meme is, like people reached out to me on DM, how's your trade going? And I'm like, I don't trade, but
Yeah. I know. Well, and I've interviewed people that are big Bitcoiners who trade, and like CJ Wilson, I think, was talking to me about trading, and Scott, I know Melker has traded. I'm just not a trader. I'm not in it. I don't want to deal with the taxes. I'm a hodler. I don't want to try to time the market and sell and then regret that I sold at a certain price and, all of a sudden it's at a new all-time high. The one thing I am sad about is I bought a pretty big chunk when Bitcoin was like 55 in, I don't know if it was like March or April. I can't remember what month, but it was right before it crashed, and I could have had twice as much. And I was like, oh, damn it. I saw it go down to 29, and I was like, oh my God, I could have had twice as much as I just bought. And I was so sad. It's kind of like, you bought the dress full price, and then all of a sudden it's 50% off at Nordstrom, and you're like, oh damn it, can I return and rebuy at this price? But it's okay. I mean, it's a long game, so.
I was going to say, remember that dress you eventually will not have in your closet, those sats will remain. So.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I know. It's still early. It's still, and that's what I tell people. But it's really funny. I'm sure you have this in your life. I've been telling people about Bitcoin in my community in my life for a very long time. And, it was like 20,000. They're like, no, too expensive. Like 40,000. No, it's too expensive. It drops down back to the 30s. No, it's too expensive. Now it's 60 and people are like, what was that link for the exchange that you sent me? How do I buy this? And I'm like, what is it about the all-time highs that people just FOMO and emotionally like, I'm too late. So it's super funny to me because at this point I'm like, wait, this is not the time that you should have been buying, but okay, you're still early. It's just people don't believe you in the bear markets, and then people are just clamoring to get in the bull market, which is, I just think it's funny.
Well, VJ's tweet, I think it was yesterday, about that, like the new all-time highs becoming someone's like ground floor, like new people's ground floor, yeah. Right? And so there's an element of like number go up is happening because of people FOMOing in at like all-time highs.
I know. Luckily, all the metrics look really good, and things haven't moved, and people are holding, and the hash rate's back up. So I feel like this Q4 is going to be as bullish as we all hoped. But it was funny, like someone was messaging me this morning on Instagram saying like, when's Bitcoin going to dip so I can buy more? And I just said to him, I go, yeah, Bitcoin will dip. It'll dip to this price when it's at 100. So buy today or buy, 3 months from now when it's 60. But yeah, it's just funny.
Yeah. Well, hey, to kind of transition more towards your podcast, as a selfish question for me, for people in the podcasting game, what are some things that you've learned? Because you've gone, I mean, obviously, having that Bitcoin magazine pass at the conference was huge for helping to grow your podcast, but that's not the only reason you've grown substantially. Quality of your questions, those sorts of things. Persistence. And so what are some lessons that you've learned as you've grown in influence with your podcast that you could potentially pass on to people who are thinking about getting in the game?
Yeah, I mean, definitely what you mentioned about persistence. I think that people should look at what the space is missing and try to fill it in a unique way with their skill set. So for me, it just so happened that I'm super passionate about origin stories and backstories. And I literally didn't know and didn't really care, to be honest with you, whether anyone else did. It's just that was my passion. I had this other podcast that was career stories, and I really wanted to know how these big legends in the space and the thought leaders within Bitcoin, how they came up within their careers and within Bitcoin. And so I just was really genuine in my requests about wanting to learn more about them and also spread the message on Bitcoin and help simplify the message. All of it came from a very authentic place. I also happen to have the skill set of production and interviewing people. That's all I've been doing for the last 10 years. So I think it was that idea of like where preparation met opportunity. So I think that that's what people should really focus on. I mean, if you've watched my podcasts, one of the things that I'm so proud of is when my guests say, wow, like you've done a lot of research, or you've done a lot of homework on me, or you've really like, wow, you like know a lot about me. And I really take pride in taking so much time before I interview someone to really try to watch a bunch of their interviews and programs and podcasts and read their books, because I don't want to be asking the same questions as everybody else. Because again, like this content in general today in the digital media landscape, we're just saturated with too many options. And so the good stuff, the cream rises to the top. So I just recommend that people really take a hard look at what's out there and figure out what's missing and how their individual skill sets can come to the table and fill that need. And yeah, and just be kind. Like, I mean, I try to, send nice thank yous, and I try to be nice to people, because if people are kind to me, that makes me want to be kind to the next person. And I would like to help people that are coming up after me because because I received kindness, and I just think it's like a pay it forward mentality, not to bring it back to George Pepperdine or anything, but like freely you receive, freely give. I'm a big believer in that. So I think like the more that you get help, the more you want to help people along the way. So I just think kindness is really important.
Yeah, I love that you brought in the Pepperdine Waves reference.
Just for you.
That's amazing. Well, Natalie, for people who have been living under a rock and don't know where to follow you, can you plug away where they can get in touch and watch?
Yes, if you've miraculously stayed through this whole interview and I haven't bored you to death, I'm on Twitter at Nat Brunell. I'm newly on TikTok. I might just try to TikTok. I want to try to come up with some Bitcoin content. So if you have ideas, send me. I have my podcast, Coin Stories. Please subscribe on YouTube so you can see the video versions. I always love those, or you can find it on your podcast platforms. And then if we do continue the workshop series, then you can find information on btcforwomen.com.
Awesome. I think you and Tip at Tip and Z, she's also a Bitcoin TikToker. You guys should have a back and forth TikTok on Bitcoin.
I'll have to find her. Everyone's been encouraging me to do TikTok, and I was sort of just trying to avoid it because I just opened TikTok and it terrifies me. Like, the whole platform terrifies me. I also have a friend who worked for TikTok and told me that it is a Chinese surveillance tool. So I've been trying to avoid even putting it on my phone. But everyone's like, that's a great place to educate people on Bitcoin, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll let China just take over my whole phone so I could spread the word on Bitcoin.
It's probably nothing they don't already know from any other platform. So,
I know.
Well, Natalie, it's been awesome having you on. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh man, what an awesome episode. It was really fun to talk about just her journey in this space and just kind of what drives her, what are Natalie's passions, and just bringing a knowledge of not just Bitcoin as a solution, but what's the underlying problem, and just orange pilling as many people as she can along the way. And it was really cool to hear her outtakes on, building a podcast, be yourself, bring your unique viewpoint. That's what people are looking for. And some of the life hacks, podcast hacks that she has set up in this episode for how to get people on, get their attention. I think just the way she's changing the tide really comes down to that element of making people who have been in Bitcoin a long time and have incredible thought leadership, they've built something cool, to get their story out, make them relatable, and for people to realize that Bitcoin is not this crazy, difficult thing, but that the people who actually know a lot about it, they've invested time, energy, money into learning, securing, acquiring and securing their Bitcoin, and then just letting them tell their story about what drives them too. So, hey, if you liked the episode, please go ahead and give it a like, give it a subscribe. Comments, hopefully positive, will help to boost the show on YouTube and pretty soon here on the Apple, Google Play, Spotify, and all those other podcast places. So be up there soon. All right, guys, thanks again and see you next time. Keep changing that tide.